Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 7. This week, we're going to talk about job analysis. I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it. When we talk about job analysis, um, really what we're talking about is a process. So this is the pre-work you have to do before hiring, recruiting, onboarding, any of that other fun stuff. This is the work you need to do to make sure you're setting your employees up for success. So this is a systematic process of collecting data to determine the KSAOCs, your knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics required to successfully perform a job. This is also how you can make judgment about the nature of the job. A proper job analysis gives the appropriate discretion to hiring managers to be able to select candidates based off of their fit on this position. A lot of times what you run into in hiring practices is that if the KSAOCs were not adequately defined and the job analysis was not performed as thoroughly as necessary, you end up making almost arbitrary hiring decisions because you really don't know who's going to perform the job the best. When you conduct a job analysis, you're identifying the stuff that the position does, your activities, behaviors, tasks, standards. You're also talking about the context in which the job is performed. So this is multiple different things. So this can talk about a time context. Are you a term limited position? Is it a temporary position? Is it part-time? Is it full-time? And then the other context is like, where are you actually doing the job? Are you out in the field? Are you splitting time between the field and the office? Are you working a full office job? Are you working a hybrid schedule? Are you working full at home? This is stuff that's come up recently that has taken on an extra layer, and we have to be really cognizant of. And then the personal requirements necessary. So these are things like lifting requirements. Are there physical limitations that you have, or that will preclude you from being able to do a job? These are the sort of things that come out of a job analysis. And then it's also analyzed in terms of its relationship to other positions. So oftentimes, I brought in a sample job analysis. I'll talk to you about it, but it's important for HR professionals to really understand where a position fits, who it's going to be interacting with primarily, and what that responsibility is. What this is trying to do is it's trying to prevent any sort of contestations about authority, any conflicting roles. Those sort of things are what you're trying to get out of a job analysis. Then you're also able to conduct strategic job analyses as well, recognizing that most jobs will be stable, but they need to adapt to meet future demands. We'll talk about that when we get to it. So, steps in conducting a job analysis. I recently went through this, so this will be a lot of fun to see how good I was as compared to what the literature says. So first thing, you need to collect information about the job. The best way to do this, and this is going to sound really straightforward, and a lot of things are, you literally just go find other types of that position at comparable organizations. So at the federal level, you're looking for positions either in other places in the federal government, or you're looking to the private sector. When you get down to the state and local government, you're trying to find comparative states and comparative cities, comparative counties. That's more difficult than it seems, because what you're judging off of isn't always as simple as population or number of employees or budget level. There's a lot that goes into it, and each organization will do that differently. So once you collect that information, you're then going to start listing out the tasks, the things that you have to do as part of this position, and then you're identifying those critical tasks, those priority tasks that make or break a person's ability to perform in this position. Then you're identifying critical competencies. Then you're linking tasks and competencies, right? So great way to think about this. Let's think about it in terms of finance. You have accounts payable, accounts receivable. You might need to be able to reconcile accounts payable and accounts receivable. That is a competency. The critical task is the physical interacting with QuickBooks or whatever system you use to input that sort of reconciliation skill. And then you're choosing selective and quality rating factors. Like I said, when you're searching job description, it really is a lot of just kind of exploring and openly collecting data. What are your current employees doing? Are there sample job descriptions out there? What's great about working in the public sector is most job descriptions are public record, and so you often are able to find comparative positions down the line. And then you analyze the work duties, tasks, responsibilities, research and sharing with other companies that have similar jobs, and then articulate the most important outcomes or contributions needed from the position. So that's the strategic component, or how is this advancing what our organization is trying to do? Job analysis has a couple of different parts. The first part is recruitment and selection. So this is the part that we've talked about already, identifying your KSAOCs and identifying the skills of the people the agency must recruit and hire. So what is this job going to do, and what do we need the person coming into this job to be able to do? And then compensation systems. We're going to talk about compensation in a couple of weeks. This provides a standardized procedure for systematically determining pay and other benefits across the organization. One thing we're going to talk about with compensation is the multiple different philosophies for how compensation is calculated. Particularly in the public sector, compensation is really important to get right because there are more limitations on how people are compensated in the public sector, and we'll get there. And then HR planning and that strategic development of these positions. So this is about this is a more modern approach to HR. This is about, is there a natural progression within the organization for this position, right? If you're the accountant doing reconciliation of accounts payable and accounts receivable, is there a way for you to move up, progressing in responsibility, right? Are there ways that we can train people to move into that next level? This is part of that workforce planning, succession planning stuff that you have to do, and it all starts with a job analysis. Then you're also starting the process of performance evaluation. So what are the tasks and responsibilities? What are the things that this position needs to do that is easily translated to accountability and evaluation, right? So oftentimes, one of the things that we want to put in our job descriptions is excellent communication skills, right? Excellent communication skills is very, very difficult to translate into something that's easily tracked and accounted for on a performance level. It really is more of a gut feeling. And so you really want to take the time to understand what are the key components of this job and how are we going to measure it as objectively and productively as possible. Risk management. We identify those job hazards. If they're working out in the field, are we providing them with PPE? Are we getting the people into the positions that are understanding of those potential hazards and risks? And then what is the job design? How do we know if a position is coming in that we need to hire for, but we know down the line we can foresee that maybe this accounts payable and accounts receivable reconciliation is actually a function of a new software that we're going to bring in. That is part of this design, to understand that we don't necessarily want to that automation, those systems, to remove people from their jobs. So is there a way that this job can progress and change in a different way? And how can we restructure it when it comes about? Job analysis data is really important from a legal perspective as well. There's a lot of interaction between HR professionals and employment law, and job analysis is another component of that data. So for example, if you've ever had to take a test going into a job interview, those are used for selection, promotion, and pay increases, but they must be based on a job analysis. So for example, if your job analysis does not list a certain level of proficiency with Microsoft Excel, then you're tested on Excel to be selected for that job, that's actually illegal. It is really important to ensure that we're aligning those job analyses with the work that we want them to be able to do. You conduct job analyses in a bunch of different ways, but you're either developing a job description for a new position, you're identifying job specifications. So this can come up if you've got a new position coming along and it doesn't identically match up with another position. How do you ensure that it is specified to its specific location? What is its role? And then to place a job within its job family classification. You'll read more about this in your text, but what are those classifications categories that this job falls into. What are the common skills, qualifications, technology, licensing, working conditions? This is a good way to think about this sort of classification is you do not want to be conducting similar job analyses for someone who's doing physical labor all day to someone who's looking at a computer screen all day. Those are fundamentally different jobs, and it's important to understand the families that those then fall into. Um, it also helps ensure that an organization is complying with all the rules of recommendations. A good job analysis is actually a protective tool that is going to help you avoid potential litigation in an employment law court down the line. Job descriptions, job analyses need to focus on results and outcomes because a person with a disability may be able to achieve outcomes in a different way. I'm going to repeat that because we've been talking about EEO, we've been talking about DEI in the last couple of weeks. Job descriptions should focus on the results and outcomes of that position. Because a person with a disability, a differently abled person, may be able to achieve those outcomes in a different way. This is something that requires a lot of mental adjustment for organizations. There's a long tradition of micromanagement. There's a long tradition of over scrutiny, especially in the public sector. And it's really important for us to understand that as long as you're acting within the law and achieving what the job needs to achieve, I don't think that there's any reason why we should be precluding people from being able to do that job. However, there's been for a long time, especially when you're talking about things like ADA, that people have been systemically discriminated against because they may not be able to perform the job in the way that is expected of them. That doesn't mean they can't do the job. Loosening up those requirements is really important to promote a diverse workforce and really support the differently able community. When you're collecting this job analysis information, you have to determine what's the purpose of the job and then what information do you need to help define that purpose, right? So for our example, this person is going to help reconcile accounts payable and accounts receivable to ensure that our money is properly managed within our nonprofit, right? So the sort of thing that we're going to go out and find is we're going to find out, what do positions like this normally do? What's the minimum education requirement? Is this something that we can sub out education for potential skills? Is this where we can say, a master's degree or equivalent job experience, right? Or is this something where we genuinely need a specific type of education for our people? What's the equipment and tools used? What are those working conditions? What are the responsibilities in terms of supervising and managing other people? What are the interpersonal and communication skills necessary? Who are you talking to, both internal and external to the organization? And then what are those KSAOCs fundamental to you being able to perform your job? What I'd like to show you right now is actually an example of a job analysis that I have recently conducted. Let me get it pulled up here. Maybe. It's not responding. Oh no. If only I knew how to edit videos, and then I would just take this part out of the... Oh no. How exciting for me. Anyway, all right. Well, I will come back to that if that's able to load properly. Wonderful. I'm doing great so far. All right, wonderful. How do we collect this job data? This is what the book says. I'm going to be honest with you. This part right here, internet-based data collection, is pretty much it. What I would like you all, and many of you have reflected on this in emails and communications with me, and also in your workforce plans, that it's kind of hard to be rigorous in terms of the research you're conducting for individual organizations. That's just a reality of most organizations. In grad school, you're going to be given tools to be rigorous and conduct excellent research and be able to perform the job well. But at the end of the day, when you're asked to do something, you've just got to get it done. And a lot of times, what we end up doing is just collecting data on the internet. We're calling people in other organizations asking about that. I get emails on a weekly basis that are like, "Hey, I'm doing this thing in this organization. Do you have time to chat?" And it's really important in professional communities to be able to share that sort of information. There's other things you can do to collect that job data. You can go watch someone else do a similar job. You can have people fill out a questionnaire. You can create a structured task checklist. You can just observe or diary or log what's going on in a job, or you can do a combination of all of these different things. Whatever you end up doing, you just want to be thoughtful about how you're collecting that data to ensure that you're being as fair and as equitable as possible in creating this job. Um, when you're conducting a job analysis, you can interview, and then you're asking questions of the hiring manager, like what is the job being performed? What are the major duties of the job? What physical locations does it work in? Really collecting that information. And this slide has a good list of responsibilities. So whichever of you is assigned to the job analysis and classification portion of the end project, you'll have some of those tools up front. Then, if you're conducting a questionnaire, additional information, what are the things that you need to know to fill out your job analysis? And then when you're collecting this job data, it's important to use the right analysis technique that matches the job skills or requirements of the organization. Um, what I want to emphasize here is that job analysis is an art and a science at the same time. So, there have been plenty of people, especially in hard HR professions, who are going to create rigorous systems for interviewing and filling and sending out questionnaires around job analysis and doing these different things. But at the end of the day, unless you're going into a hard HR field, really what you need to be able to do is, what are those core things you're looking for? What is the basis of this position? And when you're working with your HR department, or if you're doing this on your own, what sort of information do you need to ensure that you're fully fleshing out this position? When you're determining how to collect information for a job analysis, you can look at the location, the number of incumbents, the number of people already in this position, right? What are the work conditions and environments? And then what are the knowledge, technology, and other personal factors needed to perform this job? And then you can go about selecting your different types of job criteria. Like I said, unless you're going into a hard HR field or HR position, really what you're going to be looking for are these sort of things. What are your KSAOCs? What are the skills that we're looking for? And then from there, you're talking about performance evaluation and job design to ensure that you're supporting your employees fully. Wonderful. So let's take a look at one of these strategies. This is a structured task checklist. This is an example from your Pines text. I won't read through everything, but there is a very cool way that these are structured to allow for a super straightforward approach to collecting KSAOCs, right? So if it's a new position and you're not sure what this sort of job can do, you can create a structured task checklist and then go through standard tasks like keyboard inventory reports and budget reports, proofreading, typing on a keyboard, or editing manuscripts. And then you use this structured task to allow the people either doing the job or the hiring manager to identify those functions that are core to your job analysis. When you're designing a job analysis program, you want to understand why job information is collected and how it will be used. We don't want to just go out and start collecting generic information. A lot of things we're going to look for right away. We're going to look for compensation levels. We're going to look for education requirements and experience requirements. But really, that's not always why we're conducting job analyses. Sometimes we're conducting job analyses because we need to ensure that departments are completely fleshed out. That if we're, for example, creating a new city, we want to ensure that the job information we're collecting is helping us develop the sort of positions that we need within our selected departments, right? Are you using your job analysis to determine that compensation, right? Are you using it to determine performance measures? So are you using it to determine education, experience, or training? You might be doing all of these things. You might be doing only one or two of them. But it's important to understand the purpose and how it will be used to properly allocate your time and resources. Um, it's also important to realize, and this is particularly important if you're working with existing employees, that sometimes employees are going to be sensitive to the information being collected, which might cause them to emphasize certain things over others. A great example of this in the field is if you're working to develop a new position that might be overseeing a certain division of, let's say, public works, right? They're overseeing snowplow operations. Well, when you go out to collect information about what that job may do, you're going to go talk to the employees that would eventually report to this position. However, some people may be sensitive if they've had previous experiences with bad supervisors, or they might know someone who might be interested in the position, so they're almost pre-selecting those criteria. And so it's important to understand and create a safe environment for those employees you're talking to collect that appropriate information. The other thing here is also talking about pay, right? For as much as we can, we're trying to collect pay information without talking to employees because it can be both legally problematic and also create, tense relationships with employees. So we want to use that data. But if we do need to talk to employees about pay, we want to try to keep it generic, and we want to ensure that they know that their information, that their responses to questionnaires or surveys or interviews are not going to be used against them personally. But we want people to be honest, and so we're creating that safe environment, right? Um, when you're conducting a job analysis, you have to keep in mind the context of the organization at a larger scale, right? What are the cycles of work that this is conducting? So if we go back to our example about reconciling accounts payable and accounts receivable in a finance department, right? We can talk about, what are your daily responsibilities? What are you doing? But really, what's more important to understanding this position is the cycles. And so we'll say, for example, this position has to conduct this reconciliation once per quarter, right? So it's once every 3 months. And so understanding that flow is going to help you properly not overburden this position with too many responsibilities while also appreciating the importance of their work in the cycles that come through. Um, and then you always want to make sure that if job analyses are being conducted either for a new position or for an existing position, you always want to notify and explain employees in that position and their supervisors of that position's analysis. This gets back to our top conversation, right? We don't want people to feel almost we don't want them to feel at risk when they're interacting with people. There's already a culture in most organizations in which HR is seen as the enemy, as the arm of the organization. And frankly, for a long time, HR has done nothing to address that concern. But it's important to know that when we're conducting this research, whether it's for a new or existing position, we're notifying the people that are directly affected by the analysis. Now, when we're writing job descriptions and job specs. We're using that job analysis, we're using that data collection to help create that description. What is the job? Where is it? What's those general responsibilities? What are those essential functions and duties? What are the KSAOCs? What are your qualifications? What are your education requirements? This is all really important to be able to get out up front. If you look at any sort of government job posting, you're going to see a similar structure that follows this sort of job description because the data you're collecting from a job analysis is directly feeding this information. Now, we can also conduct a strategic job analysis. Job analysis is a really important thing to be able to do in any sort of HR position, but a strategic job analysis is really taking it to that next level. So we've talked about strategic human resource management as an approach to managing our HR systems, right? But we can do that with each of the functions within our HR department as well. So for a strategic job analysis, we're not just focusing on our KSAOCs as they currently exist. We have an idea towards the future of both our organization and the culture and society in which our organization sits, right? So, perfect relevant example for everyone. The jobs or the organizations, the businesses, the companies that most successfully managed the transition to hybrid or remote work during the pandemic were the ones that were already using strategic job analysis to build this into our system, right? So our positions that we're hiring, do they have the potential to be hybrid at one point? Do they have the potential to be fully remote? Um, are we understanding that this is a position we want people to work up through the organization? So how are we transferring some of those managerial responsibilities to those employees doing the work? What are the cross-functional responsibilities? This is a really important thing to be able to do, because if you've got only one person in the organization that can reconcile accounts payable and accounts receivable, then if that person leaves, you have no one able to do it. So are there other positions you can help create that expectation and help cross-train, make sure the organization is covered? We're not at a loss if a single person leaves the organization. And then we want to shift towards teamwork and interrelated activities. So this is really where we're focusing more on the ideas of who is this person working with. If I would have been able to pull up the example, that would be great. I could show you this, but who is this person working with? When are they interacting with them? You always want to try to be as specific as possible when you're conducting these sort of things, because who they're interacting with is going to directly impact everything above them, right? If you have to meet in person every day with certain people, then the position is going to be less flexible, right? If this position is overly burdened with menial tasks throughout the day, it might be hard to transfer some of those managerial responsibilities to them. And then, are we cross training people to help promote teamwork and help promote that communication, or are we keeping people siloed? Um, when you're conducting that functional job analysis, a great way to think about this is through data, people, and things, right? So, what are the goals of the organization? How does this job feed that? What workers do to achieve those goals? What's the level and orientation of what the workers do? So, are they doing something that is directly impacting the goal of the organization, or is it feeding maybe a tactic or an objective that gets up to that larger strategic outcome? What are your performance standards? This is something that most positions are woefully inadequately evaluated based off of performance metrics. And we talked a little bit about that a couple of weeks ago in our discussion about how performance metrics are often manipulated to achieve specific outcomes. We don't want to see that. We want to ensure that the performance standards we're creating are both functional and realistically reflective of the work that that the position is performing. And then what do we need to do to be able to train those employees, right? Competency modeling is another strategy that we can use. We're talking through this. We have this traditional way of conducting a job analyses and writing job descriptions. We have then strategic job analyses, which kind of has this eye towards the future and the larger goals of the organization. Then we have competency modeling. Competency-based job modeling is describing the job in terms of the measurable, observable behavioral competencies that a job must exhibit, or that a person must exhibit doing this job. Competency models are generally considered to be more effective in managing performance because it covers a broader range of jobs than a traditional job analysis can, right? So, what are the things that you're looking for in this position? Are they leading? Are they making timely decisions? Are they supporting and cooperating with others? Are they interacting with and presenting to specific individuals or bodies? Are they analyzing and interpreting data? Are they creating or conceptualizing perhaps renderings of buildings and structures? Are they organizing and executing specific projects? And are they adapting and coping to the environment? And then finally, I will once again move my head out of the way so you can see it. Are they doing their job? Are they enterprising? Are they going above and beyond? Are they taking that next step to really get to the next level within the organization? What I will say, just to be careful about that last one, is that we don't want to model our jobs based off of unrealistic expectations. We don't want people to assume, like, we want to assume the best of employees. We want to set high standards for our employees, but we also don't want to say that doing something outside of your competency job description is somehow failing these employees, right? This is part of the great resignation that we've run into, right? Where people who stopped putting in the extra hours without being compensated. And so people started looking at that and say, well, they're just not executing as much as they used to. And what could have prevented a lot of that concern, a lot of that disagreement between employees and their employers is competency-based job modeling, right? What are the competencies? What does an enterprise employee in this position actually look like? Excellent. Other techniques, we can conduct position analysis questionnaires. We can look at the Department of Labor and look at their procedural and functional job analysis systems. Is there a comprehensive occupation data analysis program for these types of positions, right? What are the element methods within our jobs? We can do the task inventory analysis, and we can also use an occupational information network. So these are all fancy ways of, are we using online resources? Are we creating the appropriate tools to be able to help us conduct the analysis? And then that last one is, are we talking to people in the field about a position like this? When we're talking about our different positions, we're talking about job analyses. We can also talk about performance in a contextual sense, right? Um, this is referring to the aspects of performance that are unrelated to the specific tasks of the job, including activities directed at enhancing the interpersonal and psychological environment that facilitates task completion. Pines is very wordy. Essentially, what we're trying to get at here is that what parts of your job help contribute to you doing your job better that we may not be able to quantify. So one of the things that we can do is a personality-based job analysis. This is where we use 12 personality dimensions. You can use the Raymar, Schmidt, and Guion system. You can use the DISC model of leadership. You can do a self-descriptive index. You can use the International Personality Item Pool and the Position Classification Inventory to help figure out what sort of personality is going to most succeed in this position. Now be careful, because remember, one of the things that we've run into over history is that often these personality-based requirements, these personality-based analyses have been used to exclude people of different cultural and lived experiences. And so when we're conducting a personality-based job analysis, make sure we're doing it right. Make sure you're doing it for a specific reason and you're being rigorous and thoughtful and you're incorporating those DEI principles into the analysis you're doing. You can also do a team-based job analysis. There's often positions you're going to run into that have a huge team component to it, that they are required to work with other people, that there is no individual success that will lead to group success. There is only group success. And so you have to understand you have to understand these different things to know if teamwork is required to successfully perform the job, right? Are the tasks interdependent on one another? Are you relying on other people to complete the task? Is the end goal interdependent? So are you doing things and relying on other people to help deliver that final project? Are there feedback and rewards that are independent or interdependent upon one another? And then is there a lot of communication cooperation between groups? Most positions are going to have some sort of cooperation and even an interdependence component to it. Team-based job analyses are really more used for filling specific roles on particularly technical positions, right? So if you're looking at, for example, city planners or city engineers who have a very technical skill and they're required to work interdependently with other people, you don't want to hire someone who's not going to fit and help achieve those team goals, right? Because that's not fair to the incumbent employees. It's also not fair to the person you're bringing in, because if they're not going to fit, you don't want to create an expectation in which they have to try to make their personality fit. So job analysis, a lot to talk about. Really, overall, what I want you to understand is that before we make any decisions, recruiting, selecting, hiring, developing anyone, organizations need to take the time to audit the skills and positions of their incumbent employees. This is really important. So I've talked about this entire lecture through the lens mostly of creating new positions, right? Which is an important part of this job. But to really understand where your organization is and whether or not positions are being properly managed and properly fulfilled, you have to audit incumbent employees. You have to go and look and see, are the existing employees doing what their job description, job analysis says they should be doing. It's also essential. It is a prerequisite for compensation. You have to have a job analysis before developing a compensation system because you're often tying job related competencies that can help objectively evaluate performance to and connecting that to the compensation levels of these different employees. You can then use that to help evaluate performance, restructure work activities, and assess risks. When you're conducting a job analysis, a couple of different things to keep in mind. Different sources of information may yield different information easily enough, right? And remember, you in the text in your readings, you're going to hear a lot of different things that are different rigorous ways to do it. But on the most part, it's just about being thoughtful about where you're collecting your information from. If you are a public sector entity, are you only drawing information from the private sector, and what impact is that going to have? Are you conducting surveys or interviews with employees, and have you created the proper environment for them to be honest when they're sharing? Other things, this is pretty straightforward if you've ever read about done any research ever, but observing just one person rather than a larger group of people may bias the information. That's something that happens in my job all the time when I embed with different employees. You often find out that employees are doing things differently and they just achieve the same outcome, so it never really gets caught, right? Job analyses also help explain how a position is currently structured and not how it's structured in the future. That's why we want to, at every point possible, take that strategic component in mind. And then when you're conducting these analyses, the strategic method has obvious benefits. The competency-based modeling is also something that has its benefits. Traditional analyses have its benefits, but none is inherently better or the worse. It's just important about choosing those right tools when you're conducting your own research. What I want you to do is I'm just going to leave this up on screen for a little bit after I end, but this is a good way to start to understand the process and the information that you collect in a job analysis. So you can visit the ONET website and start looking into positions you may be interested in. What are some of the skills that are similar to ones that you possess? What are those gaps? And then you can also look to the dictionary of occupational titles after that and find what that position may mean. Are those job descriptions aligning with those occupational titles? And really just kind of play around with this information. If you do that, send me a one-page memo reflecting on the exploration, give you extra credit, super straightforward here. So I'll leave this up. I'm going to put my face away, but I appreciate you all, and we will talk soon.